Hey, Composite Gloves here, and today we're going to be talking about sidechaining and ducking. And so let's really quick just answer what that is. So sidechaining, according to what I know is sidechaining, is when you use a signal to trigger the detector in a compressor to cause it to compress something else. What does that mean? Let's say I have a big bass line and then I have a kick. So I send the kick into the sidechain compressor that this bass line is going through. And I tell the compressor, hey, when the kick happens, and it's looking at the kick because the kick's going through the compressor, but it's not. It's going through a separate circuit called the detector. So when the kick happens, it looks at the kick and says, okay, when the kick happens, what do? I say, when the kick happens, go ahead and turn and compress the big bass line so that the kick can come through. So it says, okay, so when I see the kick, make the bass line shut up and then turn it back on. And that's controlled by our attack and release and all those different settings. Ducking, on the other hand, and this is sort of my definition. I don't know if it's a standard one or not, but ducking is when you just automate the volume on a thing to make room for something else that's happening at the same moment. So it doesn't always have to be a kick. Kick's the most common, but let's say that you have background music coming on and then you're going to talk, right? So you want your background music to be background music. You don't want it to compete with your voice. And so what you do, let's just say if you were going to duck it, you would just bring the volume down. You just boop, you ducked it. But if you were going to sidechain it with your voice, you would just begin talking and the compressor would go, oh, he's talking. And then it would automatically turn down the background music for you. So those are sort of my different definitions. So let's look at some examples. Now, this is not a mixed track. It's one I'm actually currently working on and just experimenting around with. It's still in its very early stages. So you could tell some ideas that I'm trying to, but some of this stuff is going to need to be mixed for me to really continue anyways. So I'm going to turn it down just because it's outrageously loud right now. Like this bass line's out of control loud. So I'm going to turn it down, and then I have this big fat bass line. It's got that, it's an acid bass line, really nice, resonancy, super great. And I think it's actually just a Citrus preset. Like I just wanted to just lay down something like that. So the 303-ish, with an O, like an actual O instead of 0. And so what we have here is this line on top. And here's the automation that goes with it. Now there's actually a kick that happens at the same time. And the problem with it is my kick will literally not be heard at all if I turn, well, it's very close to not being heard. So watch, let me go ahead. So you see that I'm sidechaining here. This is done differently in different DAWs. And Pro Tools, I actually think it's quite straightforward when you're dealing with third-party stuff. When you're doing it in FL, a little less straightforward. If you're going to use sidechain inputs, you need to make sure with some plugins that you're using the VST3 version, just so you know. Just some, like Isotope Trash 2. I'll just pull it up for you real quick to show you. So this is the VST3 version. I have to use it because if I come in here and click this little cog icon and then this one, and then I go to processing, you see I have an extra input that allows me to do sidechaining. And you would just go auto map inputs. So I would route the kick to this channel using FL's thing for sidechaining. And to do that, you simply click and then you just reduce the volume. And then the kick, it's like the soul of the kick is going there. What if the signal of the kick's going there, but you won't hear it? So it's really nice like that. I actually quite like that as an idea. Or another way to do this is the way I do it. You just shift click and we'll automatically sidechain it to that spot. Or you can right click and go to sidechain to this track and then no. You know, you got it. So there's a whole load of ways of doing this. So, okay, so I'm sending the kick to the synth line. And the synth line has a fruity limiter on it. This fruity limiter has a sidechain input. So I right click there and I see my kick is showing up because I've routed the kick to the sidechain input. I have turned the attack way down so that the second it sees this kick happening, it says, holy freaking crap, start compressing. And it compresses it according to our settings here. So I have the threshold, the knee, and the ratio. And you see it's quite aggressive actually. It's very low. Let me turn these off and show you what it sounds like without that. Now, so you see, let me do it one more time. Let's try to find the kick. I mean, it's there, but it's like pretty buried. Okay, now let's turn on the compressor. So it's a pretty night and day difference. It does come through a lot more powerful, but it's still buried but at least you can tell that there's a kick there now. So this is sort of me just trying to move along on the creative process. Later on, when I set my levels and stuff, this will be way easier to deal with. So I'll just turn crap down and make things that I think are more important louder. And I'll probably have to automate some stuff in this particular instance. But, well, in this particular instance, there's automation clips everywhere in my stuff. So, I mean, it's not like a surprise, like, oh, automation. But anyways, I've set the threshold really low so that when the kick happens, it's going to compress it quite severely. And this is my knee, which you see is very, very, like that. That was very descriptive. Anyways, and then the ratio is pretty high. It's 5-to-1. So we can even do 6-to-1 probably and still be fine. And here it is without. So that's a big effect. Now what happens, so there's a couple ideas about this. And now we'll get to ducking in a second, but there's a couple ideas about this. So you're not going to want to do this to everything, right? You're not going to want to side chain it like this, like that incredibly hard. Like it's just not something you're going to want to do. So the reason why is some people will put all their stuff into one bus. So they'll be like, oh, I'm going to side chain everything I'm going to side chain. I'm going to send to one bus. So I'll like come over here and name this or in this case, I have a compression bus, but I will come over here. I'll put everything there. This is just compression. This is like parallel compression. It's not the same thing. So I didn't mean to confuse you. But you send everything you want to sidechain. Name this one like Sidechain. And then you'd send your base here and your leads here. Everything, maybe not your leads, everything you want to be sidechained with the kick or whatever it is you plan to make a thing that's going to sidechain a lot of other things. The issue is you only have one setting, one compressor setting. So I almost never do this. I used to do it. I only did it a couple times. And then I watched a thing where deadmau5 was talking about it. And at the time, I was like really new. And I was like, oh, that sounds like a more sophisticated way of approaching it. And I've done it this way ever since. So that and volume automation. So I've gotten a little bit more hardcore, I suppose, on this. But you see it's coming here. But the kick is also doing this to the ARP. There's actually an ARP that comes in later on down the line. And I've also set a compressor. I've done a couple of things here. But what the big thing is, I've set a compressor, and you see it's a lot less aggressive on this because they're farther away in the spectrum, so they're not going to fight as much. There's a bigger distance in frequency, so it's going to be easier for me to hear the two things at the same time. So I'm not too concerned about them fighting, but I definitely wanted to duck some when the kick happens. And so that's what I've set up there. So you're going to set up like this hierarchy of things as you go. It's like setting your levels, only you're turning your levels that you turn down. You see what I'm saying though? You blend it. It's a lot more sophisticated, you get a much more exact sound, and you get it sounding the way you want. Now, let's talk about ducking. So instead of using the side chaining option, right? So let's say that I had this coming on over here, and I didn't want to use the fruity limiter to turn this guy on and off. I don't want to automate my fader because my fader is for controlling my volume. And there's also something else that we need to talk about. These things don't respond as quickly as to an automation curve as you would think they do. So if I were to right click and automate it, right? And then I was like, all right, I'm going to create this automation clip that's going to turn this kick on and off. So I want my kick, volume should be on right there and off right here. So when the kick hits, it's off. And then I'm going to put another point down my automation curve and put this down there like that. That way it's off during the initial hit, and then it turns on. This is really, really nice because you can get the exact thing you want, except for your curve is going to have, let's say that you wanted to do something like that, like really sharp and really fast. Your fader's not going to do that. It's actually, it doesn't do that. It's just because of the way the fader's code has been written or whatever. So we can't do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a fruity balance to the mix. So we're going to go to more plugins, balance. You could use the internal I haven't experimented with it. I've always just used this thing, but you could come in here and use this guy and try it out. I don't know. But anyways, I've already selected the fruity balance. And what we want to do is, when something that's really nice about FL that I think is just stellar, is I can have an automation curve that's only like that long. And I need to have one of these every time my kick happens, right? So I need to pay a little bit of attention, but I'm going to automate this instead. That way my fader stays a fader. And in other DAWs, you might be like, I don't know. In other DAWs, this is sort of a different process because this might be a little bit, there's a couple more steps sometimes. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a point there and put it. And let's say that this is going to be no good because when my kick comes in, we're going to get like the very, very beginning of the kick before that bass just tramples it. And this is controlling the volume of the bass, right? So I want there to be a little more room at the beginning. And I can be a lot more exact to be like, do I want my curve to do this? Like, I can do something like this or like that. Like way, way, way more exact. Now in the fruity limiter, I prefer it because I've gotten so used to it and adjusting it, but you actually have these, curve settings. And these curve settings are sort of like what we're doing with the automation here, but a little less so. So this is a little more exact. And so that's one reason why you might come for this and do this way. And so I identify this method as ducking, and you can actually use an envelope generator. There's automation generators that can do similar things to what this would do, right? To what a compressor would do. But instead of triggering it in a compressor, you can hook it up so that it generates automation every time the kick does something. And then you hook that up to a volume knob. So you don't have to draw the automation. But what we have here is now we have this. So the kick will still come through just fine. Maybe we want it to maybe pump a little bit more. So you can also, if you hold down Alt, move it, you can adjust the timing of this pumping very exactly. And we want this to occur right on every kick. So now that we've set our one, we can just go ahead and copy it across, and we can even select them all and do it again. And now, bang, we've officially ducked our bass for our kick. So now, let's say I want it to come through a little nicer, a little harder. Sometimes it's moving like really fast, so you don't always see it happening, but you can see it's moving around. It's trying to visually show you what's going on. But you can hear how clear that is, where before versus now we can make this a little bit. Let's go ahead and be a little more aggressive with it and see what we can get out of this. So you get something that you like. And this is, again, this track's up in the air. So I'm still messing with what I want to do exactly. And I've got to resolve this relationship, because this is the moment where it, like, bam, it hits you. So I got to make sure that's really nice and that it follows through with just a stellar, like, pounding, relentless kick thing. So, okay, that's what we have going on there. And those are some alternatives. Let me show you. So now you're probably wondering, okay, so you understand that this is actually a lot easier than you might think, because then you just make it. And let's say you want to do something different for one kick, or maybe have more kicks. Well, you can just chop it and copy it over. That's no big deal. If you want to change your mind later, this will adjust them all. Or if you just want to change one, you can just go to make unique, and now you can just change the one while the others remain the same. The other thing about this method is, not this method. The other way to achieve ducking without necessarily writing all that automation is we could open up if we come down here to the kick, and let's say, okay, there is a fruity peak controller. So this thing, we'll look at the audio, and if we play it with the kick, let's go ahead and I'm going to detach it so we can see it while I'm playing it. Here we've got, it's generating automation, right? And now what we're going to do is this is turning it on while it's going, and we want to invert that, which there is a way to do this. There it is. That's what it is. Okay, so you turn the bass. So the bass right there is at the bottom. You turn it up. And I don't use this method super often. I come in here every now and then, and I can figure my way around the plugin as I go, because it's pretty self-explanatory. But it's just generating our output, right? And this is actually going to appear as a controller signal. And you can actually control the tension and stuff by messing with this guy. So see, oh, look, you get different curves, and you can be exact and whatever. Okay, so that's great. Maybe we don't want it to go down as far. Maybe we only want to go down a little bit. We don't want to duck it all the way. So you can set your settings like that. So that's really great. We're going to leave it like that because we want it to be sort of a noticeable thing. All right, so we've configured our peak controller on our kick channel. Now we're going to go over to our synth channel, and we're going to go to the fruity balance that we put on it. So we still need to hook it up to something, right? Well, if you right click and go to link to controller, you have this internal controller, and on it, you'll see we have the peak controller plus LFO. We just want the peak controller peak. And what it's going to do, and we hit accept, is link up that automation to this fruity balance. So we see it's moving according to what our fruity balance is doing. So let's go ahead and that's kind of nice. I like that shape. That should do well with our formula our formula, whatever, you know what I mean. The peak controller will do well with this. And so we'll go ahead and detach this just so we can see it at the same time. And we'll go ahead and also open this guy up, which should be detached as well. And now when we play it, So that's really great. We've got them talking to each other. They're doing their thing. And this is another way of doing ducking. Maybe you like this method more. It's a little harder, though, if you want to get like a specific curve. You can actually automate these, though. So you could automate the way the automation's being generated for your thing. And I do actually do that sometimes for ease of use, which is it's great. So if for like an automation clip, sometimes it's annoying to do middle values. So you can just automate the min and max value, which is stellar. If that went over your head, don't worry about it. So it's just a nicer way of working with things sometimes. So now if we open it up and go ahead and watch it, I linked it up to the balance this whole time. Oh my gosh. Okay, let's fix that. So we're gonna link to controller. We're gonna go to none and hit accept. Okay, and put that back there. We're gonna link this to the controller. And we're going to go to LFO peak and hit accept. Okay. See, now this kind of takes away from the vibe of the song I'm going for, though. So I'm going to have to find some middle ground and really get creative here with EQ moves, maybe some EQ automation, something to make it pop out. Maybe I'll just live with it being buried. I don't know. And that seems to be what they kind of do in the tracks that I'm using, just like acid house tracks. It seems to happen. That or they just choose a bass line that's not in the way of the kick, which I did not do so well. But we could turn the bass up and... That seems to come through okay, but, you know, we mess with it some more. But anyways, those are some methods to sidechaining. Those are some methods to ducking. There's also just a couple more little advanced ones where, again, you might want to set up a different formula controller if you want to continue to use that method for other things. But I prefer just, you know, sidechaining more. Let's set up this sidechain with a third-party plugin just because I know someone out there, it was a huge pain for me when I was still trying to figure it out. So, okay, so we have our open synth, right? And we still want to sidechain this thing, because this thing and the kick are clearly fighting. So this is a great example. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab, I'm going to use the Supercharger GT. That's what's on it. And as we see here, we have a sidechain. I'm going to activate that. And I'm going to make it so that it will compress according to our sidechain input. And we'll go ahead and activate it so that it compresses quite heavily. I'm going to go ahead and go in here, go to processing. So I clicked on this cog, that cog, processing, and auto map inputs, and bang, it automatically maps. This is our kick. If we right click, you can see it. And so that's great. Now it's looking at the kick at the sidechain input. And you can see it doing its job. It's compressing according to what we want. We can change it by just changing our compressor. So maybe we want a faster release for that. And this is where you would get fancy with your attack and release and calculate like the amount of time. You could take the BPM and calculate like the milliseconds that you would need in order to, because at this point you're creating a pumping effect. You want that pumping effect to make sense. You can get technical with it. So some of the best guys do. I tend to just go ahead and, I'm sure you could just look up online. Like, I'm sure there's a chart somewhere. And if I thought about it, I could figure out the math too. But right now, I just use my ears and just move stuff. So that's what I do. But you're going to notice this as you go. So you want to give your song a listen and make sure that whatever value you set is like, because the mathematical value doesn't always sound that great either. Sometimes it's like theoretically perfect, but then there's like a problem for some reason and you just move it. It's like, now it's theoretically imperfect, but it sounds better. So I don't know, you know, it's just, you know, usually the perfect one works out. So anyways, that's what I do. So you come in here, you figure it out so you get a good pump where you want your pumping to take place. But that's how you do it with a third party thing. Very, very simple. But again, sometimes you'll have issues just because of the VST version you're using. So that's, for example, let's open up Trash 2 and I'll show you that one as well. So if we go over here, go to Trash 2. And it's like, oh, great, here's Trash 2. I want to use the dynamics module and do some side chaining. So I'm going to hook up side chaining to the compressor and compress it like that and take this down here like that and do something aggressive. And I'm going to come in here. I'm using the VST3 version, so I'm cool. Auto map inputs, just make sure it's the kick, because sometimes you have multiple things going there, so I want to make sure of that. So we're going to bring our threshold up a little bit because that's kind of an extreme threshold. You won't really hear that much if you have it down that low. But we'll have it down, and then we'll have our attack, and then make sure your release is fast enough to, like, you know, so it releases before the kick hits again. And again, you do timing thing, and you can see it right there. So you can go ahead and manipulate these settings. And I have a video on this on the dynamics module in the Trash 2 series. So that's that. If you have any questions about this, let me know. You can hook up this idea to a lot more than just turning volumes on and off, though. You could get creative with filter movements, which is sort of like the same thing. You can get creative with, like, if it switches between a square wave and a saw wave, if it's a synthesizer, you know, you just hook it up to things. Maybe the chorus, maybe the reverb, something. Some people sidechaining the reverb, but not the actual sound. There's a lot of really cool options you have. If you have any questions, let me know. Subscribe, support me on Patreon, and have a blessed day.